America is over. I see absolutely nothing to celebrate. This country is in a recession. We have cabinet members telling us to either get a second job at a grocery store or mining coal if we can't make ends meet. Essentially, what the Supreme Court just said was it's perfectly okay for states to redistrict districts that are predominantly black or predominantly Hispanic. People of color will have less representation in Congress, and that will be perfectly legal and perfectly okay. America has never been non-racist. Clarence Thomas is not a conservative. He is a self-hating black man. And all this nonsense about make America great again, America was never great. Never. But the Constitution is a lie. That America's promise is not for you. It is for white men only. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brick City Brown Chick Show. I am your host, the aforementioned Chick, and this is Season 4, Episode 8. America is over. People who are thoroughly excited about going to the city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, in July to celebrate the nation's 250th birthday. And great, good for them. I see absolutely nothing to celebrate. This country is in a recession. Nobody wants to use that word, but we are. We have cabinet members telling us to either get a second job at a grocery store or mining coal if we can't make ends meet. We have a president who is starting international incidents with other sovereign countries and expecting them to cave, which they are not. And internally, we have the U.S. Supreme Court taking all the teeth, shall we say, out of the Voting Rights Act. Now, I've been paying close attention for the last week to the internet, to YouTube, to all sorts of sites where people are talking about different topics. And I've honestly seen more stories about Megan Thee Stallion breaking up with Klay Thompson than I have about the ruling on the Voting Rights Act. Now, why is that? For some people, it may be because we all pretty much knew that's what this court was going to do. It wasn't a surprise to many of us. But for other people, I really believe it's because they don't give a damn. Because they don't think it affects them. They have now fallen into this repeatable trap of thinking that just because laws are written toward or affect people of color, that they don't affect them as white people. That is incorrect, but this is the delusion that MAGA has placed itself in. The other delusion it's placed itself in is that they gleefully celebrate people who look like me losing their rights. And that's a sad, disgusting, abominable way to think, but that's what these so-called Christians think is a good thing. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of the Voting Rights Act and how it works. I've done a video on this channel about that. You can look it up, or you can Google the Voting Rights Act so you know what's in it. Essentially, what the Supreme Court just said was it's perfectly okay for states to redistrict districts that are predominantly black or predominantly Hispanic. or predominantly fill in the blank, that they can gerrymander it until it's predominantly white, or until the white vote cancels out all the people of color. So what that means in practical terms is that people of color will have less representation in Congress, and that will be perfectly legal and perfectly okay, because this Supreme Court said this law, this act, should never have been interpreted the way it has been interpreted for the last 60 years. And it's situations like this that really piss me off when I talk to people who say things like, oh, we settled slavery and we settled Jim Crow and we settled racism in the 60s and America's not race. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. First of all, my mother will be 92 years old in September. All of this stuff, Jim Crow and redistricting and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, all of those things are things that happened in her lifetime. So don't tell me it was a million years ago. The Voting Rights Act was signed in 1965. That was 5 years before I was born. I am 55 years old. So that's bullshit, number one. And number two, America has never been non-racist. That has never, ever happened. And at the rate this country is going, it will never happen, because so many white people are scared of being the minority. And at this point in American history, they should be scared, because they have done everything in their power to make life hell for people like me. So they and America cannot be surprised when America is majority minority, when the white people are no longer in charge. And that's coming sooner rather than later, regardless of what they think or do. They should not be surprised when descendants of people who look like me want vengeance. There should be no question and no surprise. Now, the Supreme Court's ruling on the Voting Rights Act, there were two justices in particular that I wanted to talk about today. One I am not going to talk about for very long, because I've talked about him on this channel before. And yeah, I've talked about him before. The other I've never talked about before, but I just find her view on the situation very interesting. So first, we're going to talk about the obvious person, and that is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas grew up in rural Louisiana as a dyslexic child who initially people thought was stupid and couldn't read, until a nun figured out that he wasn't stupid, he had a learning disability. So once that was straightened out, it was clear that he was an intelligent person, a person of intellect, a person that would have a future outside of his humble beginnings. What Clarence Thomas has taken and done with that is to become a lackey or a bag boy or a pool boy for white supremacy. That is who he is. That is how he lives his life. People like to argue that Clarence Thomas is simply a conservative. That is not true. He is a self-hating black man. There is no other explanation for the stances he takes on issues that affect black people. He is a person who feels like, I benefited from the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. I benefited from affirmative action and all these other things. But I'm going to pull the ladder up behind me so no one else can benefit from it. Screw the rest of you. I got mine. That is who Clarence Thomas is. There is no debate for me. There is no, well, you just don't understand. Because no, I understand conservatives. I know what a conservative is. Clarence Thomas is not a conservative. He is a self-hating black man. Period. The other justice I wanted to talk about today is Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett and her husband have 6 children. Several of those children are adopted, and specifically, 2 of those adopted children are black. And I'm just very curious what kinds of conversations go on in that household. How do you look these children in the eye, these children that you took in, adopted, and agreed to love and protect? How do you look at them and say, today mommy decided to vote to take away your power because she's a Christian conservative? How does that work? Because I honestly don't understand. Those children are either going to grow up to resent her and hate her for her beliefs and for how she looked at them and their futures, or they will grow up to be whack job conservatives just like their parents. Anybody's guess how that's going to turn out, but I'm really very curious because you can justify your Christian nationalism and your hatred and all your other bullshit to other people, but how do you do that to your children? I put people who do that in the same category as people who hate their gay children after their children come out. Your child is still your child. That child is the same person they were yesterday when you didn't know they were gay as they are when you now know they're gay. So for you to suddenly hate that child because they're gay is insane to me. And for you to be able to vote against your own children's rights is thoroughly insane. So my message today is America at 250 is just as screwed up as it was as America at 50 or 100 or 150. And all this nonsense about make America great again, America was never great. Never. Because we have never fulfilled the words of the Constitution. All men are created equal. That phrase didn't mean what it says it meant when it was written, and it doesn't mean that now. The fact that people are gleeful at taking away rights from their fellow Americans just because they are different, look different, believe different, worship different, have a different sexual orientation means that the Constitution is a lie. That is what it means. That's harsh. There are people who are going to yell and scream about that, but the Constitution is a lie. We have not met the moment of that document. And this generation of white supremacists seem hell-bent on making sure we never do. So if you are a person of color, if you are a woman, if you are a gay person, if you are LGBTQIA+, understand that America's promise is not for you. It is for white men only. And unless we all vote and rise up and say, no, this is not okay. This is America's future. Long after the current president is gone, this is America's future. So everyone think carefully about the place you call home. I want to thank everybody for joining me this week, and I will see you again next week. Take care.